Slow practice, slow practice, slow practice. How many times have you heard that in your life? Well, for me, I think in the hundreds or maybe thousands of times. But is slow practice even that great? Why should we do it? What are the advantages? And also how and why should we make it part of our practice routine? Because at the end of the day, you can also make mistakes practicing slowly. You can practicing the wrong way. To fix that, we will look at how to practice slowly but effectively. Let's get right to it. Slow practice. What is it? Let's start with that. Slow practice basically means you're reducing the tempo of your piece significantly. The percentage of that can vary. You can do half tempo. This is very typical. For example, has been referenced by students of Liszt. You can do way more slowly at the point where maybe 10 or 20%, which has been referenced as to what Rachmaninoff himself was doing. Actually, he might have been even lower in the percentage points, since a student of his said that she was waiting outside the practice room, and she was wondering who it was practicing. That student was playing so slowly that the piece almost became unrecognizable, and it turns out that student was Rachmaninoff practicing. So there's tons of evidence that suggests that slow practice is the way to go. But why is it the way to go, and is there a correct and wrong way to do it? Let's talk about first why it's a good idea. If you do slow practice, you take your time to look at certain details or aspects. Now, these details and aspects were also looked at in the research. For example, they include articulation, musical expression, and also the technical precision and accuracy. So for example, if you take your time and really try to phrase out, 4 or 5 bars in a very slow tempo, it's like you're doing everything in slow motion. You have a very good kind of connection to your ear by doing that. Normally our ears might be overwhelmed in the real-time tempo to control everything. So if we do things slowly, things like articulation, things like musicality, dynamics, can be controlled to a way better point. In a slow scale, you can build things very precisely. Then when you upscale it to a faster tempo, you can keep that same amount of precision. So for example, accompanied to this research, there was a survey that asked the participant how many of them did slow practice. Unsurprisingly, 99.45% of the participants said they included slow practice in their routine. Let's talk about 3 types of practice that many researchers tend to agree on exist for slow practice. The first one is a technical slow practice. What do we do there? We play a passage, a technical element or passage very slowly, gradually ramping up the speed. Therefore, we can ensure that the precision exists and can be transferred to a faster tempo. This technical type of slow practice is, I believe, the most dominant one and the reason why people do slow practice. In a slow speed, like I said, you can control and focus on your precision and, for example, where your hand is on the keys, not only meaning the notes, but also the exact position, for example, on the key. And then once you upscale that tempo, you can keep most of that precision. Of course, you also get more aware of patterns and hand positions, and you can control everything nicely in that slow tempo. The difficulty is, how can we keep that same precision in a faster tempo? Because the truth is, the movements slightly alter once you speed up the tempo. The movement when you do a slow kind of practice, or you play in a slow tempo, has a lot of wiggle room because you have a lot of time between the notes possibly to do certain things. This is why technical slow practice in itself, like only doing snail pace, is not so beneficial because you never get the transformation to a faster tempo. This is why you need to include ramping up the speed. The second type of slow practice that has been determined is the expressive slow practice. This is what I mean by articulation, focus on dynamics, focusing on the voicing, melody. Everything like this is expressive slow practice. I think this is especially beneficial for training our ears, which in the end are the best controlling mechanism for what we do. Slow practice allows you to listen in closer and to process everything really well, because in real-time speeds, it's difficult to catch everything. The third type of slow tempo that was identified is the preparational slow tempo. So this is, as we know, our warm-ups, right? When we warm up, this is a quite common thing to do. I think we start slowly. It doesn't mean we have to start with an exercise. It can also mean just when we sit down at the piano, the first thing we do is not immediately fast. From my personal experience, I would say this is absolutely true also for me, and turned out to be true for, I think, over 90% of participants. We do not immediately attack the keys and go straight to 100%. So we kind of use the slow practice also as a preparational tool to get our body warm, and then we can go at faster tempi. I guess it has to do with discipline, also has to do with certain amount of, I don't know, like musical wisdom almost, that you know that the fastest way to get somewhere sometimes is the slowest. Now let's talk about 3 possible mistakes you can do in your slow practice routine. The first mistake is you never increase the tempo. This might sound strange, but like I said before, slow movements are different than fast movements. Eventually you have to gradually increase the tempo, because you might be surprised that certain things do not work in the performance tempo due to you have less time to do things, the fingering suddenly didn't work for that tempo, or overall you had the wrong movements. Try to gradually increase the tempo. First to slow practice, get it in your muscle memory, repetition. After that, increase the tempo to the point where you can tell, I feel okay with this, I feel comfortable with this. Or it's back to the drawing board, I might need to switch my fingering, this movement doesn't work for me. But the real testing area is once you ramp up the speed. The second common mistake is people end up playing mechanical. This, I think, has to do with just one aspect being regarded, namely the technical one, when practicing slowly. If you just do slow practice because of your technique, you might end up playing very technically once you ramp up the speed. It's the case, for example, with etudes, that people just practice them and drill them in a slow tempo, then they ramp up the speed and they think, that's it. But the musicality is completely missing. Expression, musical expression, and things like just everything that has to do with it, starting from articulation, ending to timing and everything like this, is also taken into account. The third, and one of the most dangerous things I believe that people do or potentially do when practicing slowly, is they choose different fingerings. What you're doing is you're making it more difficult for your brain to remember things. You take one fingering here, another one on the next couple of repetitions. You might switch on the same motive, you might switch the fingering. Of course, I don't need to tell you that this is extremely dangerous, because once you ramp up the speed, you might not even know what fingering you're doing, and then you're completely confused, and this is maybe where you have a a blackout, or you don't know how it continues. Use the same fingering always. Don't switch up your fingerings unless they really don't work. Then you have to go back to the drawing board and change the fingering. But otherwise, please don't change the fingering on repeating a section so slowly you don't even know what fingers you use. Try to be active with your mind. Be aware of what fingering you choose. Now let's touch on the subject of how much of our practice time should be slow practice. I believe a great deal of your time should be slow practice. Maybe half or even more. I'm a big fan also of near performance speed practice, but you just can't get past it. Everyone does it, and there's a reason everyone does it. It's because it works. It's been proven to work, and you can work on the details the best way if you do it slowly. So I would say half or more, possibly 70-80%. How much of the time do you slow practice? Please let me know in the comments. Also, I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, there will be links in the description, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.